Hi everybody and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to install Ubuntu 18.04 on VirtualBox. It's not like nobody else has done this before, but this is kind of a test on this channel to give me an idea of how this video recording is going to work. So let's get started. So I'm using VirtualBox. VirtualBox, for anybody that doesn't know, is a software that emulates computer hardware. It basically allows you to run a different operating system on your computer without replacing Windows or Linux or Mac OS that's already running on it. So I'm using Windows, but most of the menus and such should be the same for any other operating system. So to get started here, we're just going to hit new. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call it Ubuntu 18.04, and I'm going to find a better spot for it. VMs, and just select folder, and it's already auto-selected based on the name which Linux version it thinks I want to install. So I'm not going to use expert mode. I'm just going to go next. Now you have to give this thing enough memory. Now I like to, I have 16 gig of RAM in this laptop, so I like to give it a good 4 gig. For anybody that doesn't know, 1024 megabytes is a gigabyte. Therefore I do 1024 times 4, 4096. So now we come down to a hard drive. So the hard drive is basically going to be a file on the disk. So you have to decide how much of your precious disk space that you are able to allocate to a virtual hard drive. You can do a number of different things, including what's called thin provisioning. At least that's what's called in the VMware world. But ultimately what that does is it only increases the file size as you store more data in it. Or there's thick provisioned, which allocates all the space at the beginning. So I'm just going to go ahead and say create a virtual hard disk, and I'm going to use the VDI image. And then this is where you decide. So dynamically allocated is that thin provisioning, which will only use the space up as you increase the size of the usage on your disk. Now the caveat with that is that once it increases, it will not decrease. So if you delete things, it will not make the file smaller. Fixed size, however, is going to allocate all of the space right away. So if you choose a 20 gig hard drive, a fixed size is going to create a file or multiple files, depending on how it works, that equal 20 gig right away. Now, what is the difference and why do you want to use one or the other? Well, using dynamically allocated essentially means that it creates a really small file, so it's actually really quick to install. If you're only going to use this as testing, or if you don't really care about disk performance, this is probably the best option. For machines that you want to actually perform in a decent way, you can create the fixed size, and what that does is it doesn't have to waste time expanding that file. It's already there, and it writes directly to it, so it actually makes it faster. I'm going to give it a solid 20 gig and click create. So now it is creating that disk, and you'll see how long it takes when you're doing the fixed size where it's allocating the space. I will speed this up, and we'll see how long it takes. Okay, so that took about 2.5–3 minutes to create that file, and now we have a powered off Ubuntu 18.04. Now it's not installed, so what we have to do next is tweak it a little bit. So what I like to do is kind of go down through the menus. I will not take in a ridiculous amount of time to do this, but I'll just show you some of the options that I change. So you could enable things like drag and drop into the window for copy pasting stuff, shared clipboards. You can update the description, disk encryption, all that kind of stuff. But there's a couple of things that I specifically want to do. I want to add a second processor, and the reason for this is because most operating systems now kind of expect to have more than one core. So they actually perform really horribly when you only give it one CPU. And it typically doesn't affect the performance of your actual laptop or your machine while you're running the VM if you give it two CPUs. Sorry. Then for display, I usually crank the video memory up because typically you've got enough memory in your machine to allocate to it, and that just gives it a little bit of a video boost. So under storage, this is essentially where you're going. This is one of the most important steps. So what you want to do is select the Ubuntu ISO file that you would have downloaded, which I have already done previously, but you can go to ubuntu.com and find that ISO file and download it to your machine. And then you're going to choose a disk file, go to your downloads folder, select it, and now when this VM boots up for the first time, it's going to run or boot off of this disk and start the installation process, or you can use it as a live CD. From an audio perspective, you can just leave these settings as they are. And for network, so here's another thing that's kind of important to understand. If you leave it this way, everything should work. However, it's going to use a NAT. Now what that means, NAT stands for Network Address Translation, but essentially what that means is that it will get a network connection. It will appear to work perfectly fine. It will go to the internet. Everything will work, but it's going to be piggybacking off of your laptop's IP address. Now, 99% of the time for people who are just playing around with VMs, this will work perfectly. However, what you will notice is that your virtual machine will get a strange looking or potentially strange looking IP address. So if you want it to get an IP address from your DHCP server or your router or your whatever it is that's giving you IP addresses, then what I typically do is use a bridged adapter. Now on a desktop computer where there's only one network card installed, this will only have one option. Because I'm on a laptop, I have two options because I have my wireless and I have my wired. So right now I'm connected to the wired, so I'm going to use that. Now keep in mind that if you do install this on a laptop and you move around, if this is kind of like your test lab and you take this to client sites, or if you take this to Starbucks and sit and have a coffee, you will have to go in here for every virtual machine and actually change this to the wireless card when you're not plugged in to actual Ethernet. So now that I've done that, there's some serial port stuff here. If you wanted to have USB devices connect in, you can do that. If you want to set up shared folders that mount when you log in, so that you can share folders between your machine and between your virtual machine, you can do that. And if you want to customize some of the user interfaces, you can do that too. But I don't want to do anything more than hit OK to save the changes that I just made. And now we're going to get into the fun part. So I'm going to start the virtual machine, which, like I had mentioned previously, is actually going to automatically boot off of this disk that we put into the CD-ROM drive, and hit start. You'll notice here it says you have auto capture keyboard turned on. That's okay. All that means is that when you click inside here, it will automatically capture the keyboard, which is a happy thing to have. So it's going to automatically boot. I could have hit enter there to speed it up, but I was too busy talking. And now you will see, okay, it's going to give you, these informational messages are pretty good when you're starting out. This is telling you that it supports the mouse pointer integration, which means that when I move my mouse in here, it disappears. But what it is it's really being allocated to this operating system. So we can close that. All right, so here's the Ubuntu install. Now, we could hit try Ubuntu and it will open up like a regular live CD. It will let you play around with it and use it. But we're just going to go ahead and focus on the install here today. All right, so next is to choose your keyboard layout. This is completely personal. It's completely based on where you are, what computer you're using, what keyboard you have attached. I am in Canada, where 99% of us use the English US layout. So I'm going to hit continue. Then you have to decide what kind of installation you want. So you can do a normal installation, which includes web browser, utilities, office software, which is LibreOffice, games, media players, and all sorts of other lovely stuff. Or you can go with something a little more bare bones that just has a web browser and some basic stuff, you know, text editor, stuff that will allow you to configure the system and then install only the software you want. I'm just going to go with a normal installation because afterwards maybe we can poke around and look at what gets installed. And then you have to decide, because we're connected to the internet and it knows that, it's asking me if I want to download the updates during the install, which I will do. And then this piece here, if you're going to use this for personal reasons, where you're going to be using things like audio and watching YouTube and videos and all that kind of stuff, you want all of this here, because what this is going to do is install the media formats to watch different kinds of video. It's going to install third-party graphics drivers. If you have an NVIDIA card or anything like that, it will auto-detect that and it will install the driver for it. So I'm going to click yes, just because, and hit continue. Okay, so now we have to decide what we want to do with our hard drive. If you're doing this on an actual desktop computer or an actual laptop, this can be extremely dangerous, because if you are trying to do a dual boot of some kind, you don't want to pick erase disk and install Ubuntu. Hopefully that is fairly obvious, but I need to call it out because it's important that you understand. Because this is a virtual machine and it's basically a hard drive that I created and it's really just a file on a disk, I'm going to pick erase disk. But if you need any additional customization where you have to create your own partitions and all that kind of stuff, which is outside the scope of this video, I may create another video that shows how to do that, or at least a basic way that I know how to do that. But for the intents and purposes of this video, we're just going to go ahead and do the erase disk. You also have the option to add some encryption if you like, and you have the ability to use the Logical Volume Manager, LVM, which on laptops, at least in my experience, isn't really all that useful, because what LVM allows you to do is add more disks if you run out of space, and add them as though it's one big disk. So I find it really useful on servers, or if you have a desktop computer that you're going to do this on, you can add and install a new hard drive and then add that additional space to your main drive, which gives you one big one, and works pretty well. So I'm going to hit install now. So this basically says, hey, are you sure you want to do this? And you say continue. So now you choose your time zone. I'm in Toronto, so I'm going to pick Toronto, Ontario, Canada. You choose wherever it is that you are in the world and hit continue. Now you come to the personalization as far as name of computer, your username, and your password. So my name is Jason, so I'm going to put Jason. My computer's name is going to be Virtual Ubuntu. Let's not capitalize. My username is fine as Jason, and the password, my weak password. And you can either have it, if it's a desktop computer that you're going to use, maybe you're sharing it with your family, you can have it log in automatically. That's not obviously as secure as it could be. Or you can have it where you type your password in every time, which is what I will do. And now it's going to do its thing. So you have some slides here that you can go through and have a read. Definitely some informative stuff here if you've never seen it before. And you can see down here the progress as far as what step it's on. If you click here, you can see a little more information if I were to expand the screen. But I'm just going to let this go, and when it's done, I will come back. Okay, so installation is complete, and now all there is to do is restart the computer into your new Ubuntu system. Now what this did as part of the installation process was it actually wrote the bootloader to the master boot record of the disk that you were given. There would have been more questions around where to put the master boot record had we added more than one hard drive, or if this was done on a machine that you were dual booting with, let's say, Windows. So those, again, are a little more advanced topics that are not going to be covered by this particular video. But if there's interest, put some comments in the comments below. You can tell that I'm obviously very experienced at these videos. And let me know if you want to see something like that, and then I will absolutely post a video showing that. So let's restart and see what we got. All right, a little bit of strobe lighting effect there. It's very odd. Likely a strange video anomaly with the VirtualBox, but it should correct itself once it's booted. Even though it says press enter, I hit enter. Wasn't 100% sure if I needed to or not, but I did it anyway. Alright. Now sometimes you'll see in the logs as it goes, you'll see some errors, but don't worry about those unless your Ubuntu doesn't boot up, or once you log in things don't work properly. There's a lot of messages that fly by in the background on the screen, and unfortunately a lot of them are testing to see whether things work or not, and when they don't work, it just means that they fall back to a different method. It doesn't specifically mean that it doesn't work at all. Okay, so we have successfully installed Ubuntu because we're now at our login screen. So I'm going to click on my name, I'm going to type my password, and we should get the desktop for our new Ubuntu system. And there it is. So that's really all there is to it from an installation perspective. We've gone through exactly how to navigate the menus of the installation. We've gone through how to set up the Oracle VM VirtualBox virtual machine itself, and we've talked about we've touched on a couple of more advanced topics that we may see videos about in the future. So you could go through this, what's new in Ubuntu, and it's going to give you some things that you can set up and I'll install additional software. I'm just going to run through that really quickly. You can spend a little more time with it for yourself. But we've got network connected. We do have, I don't know if you can hear that, we do have audio working. Because I'm installing it on a laptop, it thinks that it has a battery, so it's going to report on the battery status of my actual laptop. And it has a whole bunch of programs that are installed. If you click here, it will show you the rest of the software that gets installed when you choose that option. You've got some Solitaire, an Amazon link, calculator, calendar, webcam tools, file manager, all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to run through each one of them. But that is basically it. Should be a text editor in here. Let's just start that up for fun. And you can see that this works exactly. Yes, thank you, software updater. Yes. As it would if you were using it on your own computer. How fun is that? So that's basically it. I mean, I'll touch on this too, the software updater. Ubuntu is going to go out and it's going to look for any updates. There are typically a lot of security patches and additional software updates. Sorry, let me rephrase that. There are updates to software that you have installed on your machine. It does not install any software that you don't want. So you can either do it this way and hit install now and it will go through and download all the updates, or there are ways to do it on the command line. But I'm going to save those for different videos and say thank you very much for watching this video. If you like this video, because it is my first video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you would like to see future videos that I put out, and hopefully I can get better at delivering them, if you could hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so that you can be aware of when I post them. So thanks very much, and let's just see, awkwardly switch back. Oh, yeah, you gotta bear with me. There we go. Okay. Wow. But check back often if you can. If you don't want to subscribe, that's fine. If you do want to subscribe, fantastic. And hopefully I got some more videos for you guys soon. So thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.